Hey Mike, I heard you totally bailed on today's meeting. Because of that, the deal's off. They said they can't work with a company that has employees who can't keep their promises twice. There's a reason for that. Shut up. You're fired. Don't bother coming in tomorrow. The call abruptly ended. I stood there, stunned, staring blankly at the darkened screen of my phone. I had been on my way to a critical business meeting when I got delayed helping a woman. My tardiness angered the client, and the deal that was supposed to secure the future of our company completely fell through. Little did I know at the time, this event would be the catalyst for a major turning point in my life. The company I worked for specialized in home-cooked meals. Our motto was add a little extra to family time, and we prided ourselves on offering products free of artificial coloring and preservatives. With low salt, sugar, and fat, perfect for families with young children. Though it was a small business, our unique products were resonating with customers, and sales had been steadily climbing. As a sales rep, my job was to visit grocery stores and department stores, persuading them to carry our products. Today, I was scheduled to meet with a major up-and-coming supermarket chain, JNU, to ask them to stock our items. Well, not just today, it's been over a month of non-stop attempts to get them on board. JNU was known for its bargain prices, and they kept turning us down, saying our products didn't match their lineup. However, JNU's success has been remarkable. Both Mr. Brooks and I are confident that if we can get our products on their shelves, our sales will undoubtedly soar. Mr. Brooks had high hopes for me, saying, "The future of our company is riding on this." I knew I had to give it my all. I found myself walking along the cherry blossom-lined street that stretched between J&U's headquarters and my office. The blossoms were about 70% in bloom. As I shuffled along, disheartened by another unsuccessful meeting, I noticed a family having a picnic beneath the trees. They had spread out a colorful mat and were enjoying rice balls and side dishes. When I realized the side dishes were from our company, I stopped in my tracks. A little boy, smiling, said, "This food is so good," and his parents and younger sibling beamed with happiness. The scene made it look like the family was enveloped in a warm, glowing light. Watching them, I felt a warmth spreading through my own chest. I had lost both of my parents when I was young. I was taken in by relatives, but I always felt like an outsider, treated cautiously, though not outright coldly. That's why I enrolled in a boarding high school, eager to escape that environment. Since then, I've been on my own. I haven't visited those relatives even once since I left their house. They haven't reached out either, and I'm pretty sure they were relieved when I left. Because of that, I've always had a deep longing for the kind of close-knit family I never had. When I was in elementary school, I often fantasized about having a family like that, but I stopped dreaming once I hit middle school. I finally understood that no matter how hard I tried, it was something I would never have. Enjoying family time as if it were the most natural thing in the world is a true blessing. I wanted others to keep experiencing that kind of happiness. That's why I joined my current company, to play a part in making that possible. Telling myself there was no time to be discouraged, I snapped out of it and headed back to the office. I was determined to return to J&U's headquarters the next day. I was willing to go as many times as it took until we landed that contract. The next day, as usual, I arrived at J&U's headquarters and asked the receptionist to call Alyssa, the person in charge. When I entered the familiar meeting room, Alyssa was already sitting on the couch, shooting me a cold glare. "You're persistent, aren't you? How many times do I have to explain that your products don't align with what we offer?" As soon as I sat down across from her, that's the first thing she said. I bowed my head and pleaded, Our products are designed for families. Most of your customers are families too, right? We're targeting the same group. It's about the price. Your products are too expensive, Alyssa said, shaking her head as if exasperated. I overheard something. You don't have parents, do you? I heard you went to a boarding school and joined your current company right after graduation. It's honestly off-putting to hear someone who's never known the warmth of a family try to sell me on the idea of family bonding. It feels like a complete farce. Her words struck me hard, a deep pain throbbing in my chest. I clenched my hands tightly on my knees. That's exactly why, I said. Because I don't know what it's like to have a family, I understand how precious it is. Yes, our products are a bit expensive, but the quality and taste are guaranteed. We have many repeat customers at other stores, and I'm confident your customers will love them too. It won't be a loss to stock them. I bowed my head again. Just then, I heard the door to the meeting room open. Come on, Alyssa, don't be so hard on him. Mr. Matthews. Alyssa's voice was flustered, and I looked up. There stood Mr. Matthews, the CEO of JNU. Alyssa, who had been looking down on me just moments before, quickly changed her attitude. She stood up from the couch and gestured for Mr. Matthews to take his seat. Her face was now lit up with a bright smile. Mr. Matthews sat down on the couch and looked at me, still in shock. I liked what you said earlier. If you're that passionate, we'll give your products a shot. I blinked in surprise at his sudden words. Alyssa, equally taken aback, blurted out, Mr. Matthews, in a scolding tone. He waved her off with one hand. You'll still be handling the negotiations, Alyssa, he said. Alyssa raised one eyebrow slightly at Mr. Matthews' words. However, she simply pressed her lips into a straight line and, without saying anything, gave him a small nod of acknowledgement. Overcome with gratitude, I blurted out, "Thank you so much," and bowed deeply. Mr. Matthews, still young, let out a hearty laugh and gave me 2 strong pats on the shoulder as encouragement. When I returned to the office and reported to Mr. Brooks that we'd secured a deal with JNU, he praised me enthusiastically, "Well done." 2 days later, I was heading to JNU's headquarters for a meeting with Alyssa, scheduled for 2 p.m. As I walked confidently down the path lined with pale pink flowers in full bloom, I spotted someone collapsed at the base of one of the trees. Startled, I rushed over and helped the person up. It was a woman, so beautiful that for a moment I thought she might be some spirit of the cherry blossoms. Her pale face was alarmingly blue. I pulled out my phone to call an ambulance, but in my panic, I fumbled and dropped it on the ground. When I picked it up, the screen was shattered and completely black. I held the power button, but nothing happened. Looking around, I realized no one else was nearby. With no other choice, I carried the woman to the hospital. When I tried to leave her in the care of the doctors, they said, "You must be family. Please wait here," and I was stuck waiting. I thought about using a public phone to call, but I didn't remember Alyssa's number. I resigned myself to waiting in the lobby. Eventually, the woman, now accompanied by a nurse, approached me. Her face was still pale, but she looked slightly better than when I'd found her. After the nurse left, she bowed her head to me. "I'm so sorry for all the trouble." "No, don't worry about it." "Are you okay?" "Yes, thanks to you." At that moment, I glanced at the clock and saw that my meeting time had long passed. I let out a sigh without thinking. The woman looked at me apologetically. I quickly said, "It's fine," and repeated it again, telling her I had somewhere to be before rushing off. I ran as fast as I could to J&U's headquarters. When I asked for Alyssa, she arrived with a furious expression. Late, and without so much as a call. What exactly were you thinking? Do you really want to do business with us? I'm sorry, my phone broke. I don't need excuses. If this happens again, we'll cancel the deal. Frankly, I don't think we should be doing business with your company at all. You're just selling ideals with overpriced products. It's ridiculous. Do you even take business seriously? I couldn't lift my head, feeling utterly ashamed. But the last thing I wanted was for her to think our company didn't deserve the partnership. Desperate to salvage the situation, I clung to the fact that Mr. Matthews had liked me. Could I at least apologize to Mr. Matthews as well? Mr. Matthews is on a long vacation right now. Her sharp reply left me speechless. I had no choice but to return to the office, defeated. When I got back, Mr. Brooks called me in. J&U called. They said you didn't show up. What were you doing? I'm sorry, someone collapsed, and I. What? The meeting was more important. How many times did I tell you that the future of our company depends on this? Mr. Brooks slammed his hand down on the desk, and I flinched. Listen, if you mess up this deal, you're fired. He emphasized his point by tapping his finger on his neck, mimicking a cutthroat gesture. All I could do was mumble an apology. As I walked home through the now dark streets, I felt utterly defeated. I'd stopped to buy a new phone, which made me even later than usual. On top of that, I had no energy to cook dinner. I decided to grab instant noodles and headed to the nearby J&U supermarket. As I was browsing, deciding which one to get, I suddenly felt a light bump from below. I looked down to see a child sitting on the ground, having fallen on his bottom. His nose was bright red from the impact. Are you okay? I crouched down and offered him my hand. I'm fine, the boy said, taking my hand and getting up. Jack. I'm so sorry, he is my son. Oh. As his mother came rushing over, I realized it was the same beautiful woman I had helped earlier at the hospital. I hadn't expected to see her again, and my heart skipped a beat. I had secretly hoped we might meet again, but I never imagined it would happen so soon. Thank you so much for what you did earlier, she said, bowing her head once again. Her long, dark brown hair, tied back in a ponytail, bounced lightly as she moved. Once again, I replied, it's no problem. I glanced down and met the boy's eyes. He was holding the woman's hand tightly. Seeing them together, I realized that, of course, someone as beautiful as her wouldn't be single. My briefly lifted spirits sank. I tried hard to keep my expression neutral. Mom, do you know this guy? Yes, he's the person who saved my life. What does saved mean? He's like a hero. Wow, are you a hero, mister? That's so cool. The boy looked up at me with wide, sparkling eyes. Being called Mister stung a little, but the admiration in his gaze didn't feel bad at all. My name is Sarah Matthews, and this is my son, Jack. Sarah gently patted Jack's head. Jack smiled shyly, clearly pleased. I introduced myself as well. I'd like to properly thank you. I wanted to say something at the hospital, but you seemed to be in a rush, so I didn't get the chance. I'm really glad we ran into each other here, Sarah said with a soft smile. I couldn't help but be captivated by her beauty for a moment. Would you like to come to my place? I'd love to treat you to dinner. It looks like you weren't planning on cooking tonight, were you? She glanced at the contents of my basket. Embarrassed, I felt my face flush. Sarah mentioned she lived in an apartment near the supermarket. It was small but clean and had good security. She seemed to be preparing a sabaro bowl with ground chicken, eggs, and spinach. But as I watched her cook, her hesitant movements, constantly checking the recipe, made me a bit nervous. "Would you like some help?" I offered. "No, no. This is my way of thanking you. Please, just sit down, Mike." Since she was so firm about it, I had no choice but to sit back and watch. When the dish was finally ready, some of the eggs and ground chicken were slightly burnt. The spinach was overly sweet, probably from too much sugar. Still, I ate it all. "I'm sorry it wasn't much of a thank you. I wish I could have taken you to a nice restaurant, but with a small child, it's hard," Sarah said, looking a bit apologetic as she glanced at Jack, who cheerfully exclaimed, "Thanks for the meal. More importantly, are you sure you're okay? You just collapsed earlier today." I lowered my voice so Jack couldn't hear. Sarah gave a wry smile. "I'm fine. I have to keep going. I'm the only one here to take care of Jack." I glanced around the room. There were signs of both Sarah and Jack's presence everywhere, but nothing that seemed to belong to a husband. What about your husband?" When I hesitantly asked Sarah, her expression became somber. "My husband passed away." "Oh, I'm so sorry." "I didn't mean to bring up something difficult," I stammered. "It's okay. I may seem like I'm doing it all alone, but honestly, I rely heavily on my brother." Sarah gave a small, playful smile. The contrast between her elegance and the warm smile made my heart skip a beat. "My parents died when I was young, so my brother took on the role of raising me. He probably wanted to go to college, but he started working right after high school. That job was just a stepping stone for him to start his own business. I ended up working with him. And now, his company has grown big enough to be considered one of the major players. You must be really proud of him," I said. "Yes, I am," she replied, puffing out her chest like it was her own achievement. It made me chuckle. "Your brother must be worried about you, knowing you collapsed, right?" Sarah's face clouded over. "I haven't told him. He's on vacation right now. His company finally stabilized, so he was able to take his first long break. And he's traveling through Europe with his family. A major company CEO, on a long vacation, with the last name Matthews." Suddenly, everything clicked. "Is your brother, by any chance, Mr. Matthews, the CEO of JNU?" "Yes." Sarah nodded, looking a bit puzzled. As I suspected, I couldn't hide my amazement at this unexpected coincidence. "Do you know my brother?" she asked. "Well, not personally, but I'm currently working on a deal with JNU." "Oh. So that's why you were in such a hurry earlier?" I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Sarah's shoulders slumped. Then, after taking a deep, slow breath, Sarah leaned in with a serious expression, firmly grabbing my hand. She smelled so good, I wondered if she was wearing perfume. My heart raced as if it might burst. "If this situation causes any trouble for you, please let me know. I'll talk to my brother and make it right," she said earnestly. "Oh, no, really. It's fine. I got scolded, but it looks like the deal will still go through. Plus, Mr. Matthews is eager to do business with us." "Is that so?" "If you're sure. I'd feel awful if anything happened to you because of me," she said, looking relieved but still concerned. "Honestly, don't worry about it," I reassured her. Finally, Sarah seemed convinced and slowly let go of my hand. I found myself missing the warmth of her touch, but suddenly I felt a pair of eyes on me. I looked over to see Jack staring at me with his big, round eyes. "Mister, you're a hero, right? What color are you?" He was obviously comparing me to the superheroes from the TV show he watched in the mornings. "I am green. Swift like the wind," I said, striking a dramatic pose. Jack's face lit up with excitement. "Yes. Green is my favorite. It just so happened green was my favorite too." I couldn't help but feel happy that we liked the same color. "And Mom is pink," Jack added, tugging on Sarah's arm. Sarah, eyes wide in surprise, stood up and struck a pose. "Calm like a forest," she said with a laugh. I clapped, and Sarah blushed a little. "You know a lot about superhero shows, Mike. You're single, right?" "Yeah, I'm single. Superhero shows are sort of a hobby of mine." Sarah's question made me feel a bit embarrassed, and I scratched my head. "Actually, like you, I lost my parents when I was young. I've always longed for that happy family life. I used to imagine having a family of my own, and in my daydreams, I'd play superhero with my future kids. That's how I got into watching these shows. Even though they're for kids, they're surprisingly well made, so I've kept watching them year after year." Sarah gave a soft laugh at my story, then lowered her gaze. "I'm sorry for making you remember something painful," she said. "Oh no, it's fine. If it really bothers you, just think of it as us being even. I asked you something personal too," I said with a grin, clapping my hands together. Sarah blinked, then smiled warmly. "All right," she said with a nod. We ended up spending hours talking, and before I knew it, it was past 9 p.m. Jack, after being scolded by Sarah, took a bath and went to bed. "Sorry for making you entertain Jack for so long," Sarah said apologetically. "Not at all. I had a great time. Plus, thanks for dinner," I replied. Sarah let out a relieved sigh. But I noticed she still didn't look completely well. "Make sure you get some rest too, Sarah. You need it," I said gently. "I will," she said, smiling softly. That smile stayed with me, warming my heart long after I left. I went to bed that night feeling like I could take on anything tomorrow. The next morning, I woke up refreshed and headed to work, feeling energized only to be greeted by Mr. Brooks' angry voice. "Go back and apologize for yesterday. If you don't close this deal, you're fired." Hearing the word fired again, my mood instantly plummeted. Dragging my feet, I made my way to J&U's headquarters. As a cherry blossom petal fluttered past, I thought of Sarah, and it gave me a little boost of motivation. When I arrived at J&U's entrance, I bowed to the receptionist. "I don't have an appointment, but I'd like to apologize for yesterday. Could you please ask Alyssa to see me?" The receptionist, looking sympathetic, called Alyssa for me. I was told to wait about 10 minutes, so I sat down on a nearby sofa. As I sat there, lost in thought, I suddenly caught sight of Sarah. She looked stunning in her suit, and I couldn't help but admire her for a moment. But then, her face twisted in pain, and before I knew it, she collapsed. "Sarah!" I rushed to her side. She was clutching her chest tightly, breathing heavily, and breaking out in a cold sweat. Her lips had turned a frightening shade of purple. The receptionist immediately called an ambulance. I completely forgot about my meeting with Alyssa and went with Sarah to the hospital. It turned out she was suffering from heart failure. She had been diagnosed with it the previous day after her initial collapse, and despite being told to rest, she had ignored the doctor's advice. I grew frustrated with myself for not noticing anything, casually barging into the room and enjoying dinner without a care. I had noticed her pale face. If only I had made sure Sarah got some rest. Regret started swirling inside me, tightening its grip on my chest. Sarah was admitted to the hospital. Relieved that she had pulled through, I felt my new phone vibrate in my pocket. It was Mr. Brooks. "Hey Mike. I heard you bailed on today's meeting. Thanks to you, the deal's off. They said they can't work with a company whose employees can't keep their promises twice. There's a reason for that. Shut up. You're fired. Don't bother coming in tomorrow." The call ended abruptly. I stood there in shock, staring blankly at the dark screen of my phone. Panicking, I tried calling Alyssa. She picked up, but her voice was filled with obvious irritation. "You had the nerve to ask for a meeting and then disappear? That's beyond unprofessional. I have no interest in doing business with you anymore. I'm really sorry, something came up and I had to leave. I told you before, I don't want excuses. It's clear you lack even the basic education to function as an adult, let alone a professional. I feel sorry for you growing up without parents, but that's exactly why I didn't want to work with you. Don't contact me again. And don't bother Mr. Matthews either. You're a nuisance." Just like with Mr. Brooks, the phone call was cut off. There really was no way forward anymore. I had failed at my job and been fired from the company. The realization slowly sank in, creeping up from the feet. It felt like I was being swallowed up by a swamp. As I slumped in the waiting room, a nurse came over and told me I could visit Sarah. Trying to shake off the heavy feeling that weighed me down, I made my way to her hospital room. When I entered, Sarah slowly sat up. "You don't have to get up," I said, but she quietly shook her head. Her face was completely pale. A thin, white arm was connected to and for. The last time I collapsed, they recommended I be hospitalized. I refused because of Jack, but this time, it seemed like hospitalization was unavoidable. Sarah's expression grew darker. "Do you want me to contact Mr. Matthews?" I asked. "Please don't," Sarah replied, looking up at me with teary eyes. "This is my brother's first trip with his family. I don't want to ruin it because of me." She gripped the bed sheets tightly. A single tear fell onto her hand. "I feel so pathetic. I can't even manage my own health properly. I'm a failure, both as a professional and as a mother. Jack doesn't have a father. So I have to work twice as hard, but I can't even do that," Sarah said, her body and voice trembling as she cried. She kept her head down, trying to hide her tears from me. After a brief hesitation, I nervously placed a hand on her shoulder. When she didn't push it away, I gently wrapped my arm around her back, softly patting her, hoping it would offer some comfort. Sarah kept whispering, "I'm sorry, Jack," over and over again. "Is there anyone who could look after Jack for a while?" I asked. Sarah shook her head without lifting her gaze. I let out a thoughtful hum. "If you'd like, I could take care of Jack for you. I'm pretty good at cooking, and with what I've learned from work, I can make healthy meals that are kid-friendly." Sarah turned her tear-streaked face toward me. Even with her face a mess, her beauty remained intact. "But I've already troubled you so much. I can't ask you for more. It's really no problem. We help each other out when we're in need, right?" I gave her hand a reassuring squeeze as she continued to hesitate. Thank you for your help. After a long pause, Sarah finally forced the words out. When I brought Jack to my apartment, he entered with a stiff expression and quietly said, "Excuse me," as he walked in. "You can treat this like your home for now, alright?" I reassured him. But unlike the cheerful boy I had met before, Jack didn't smile. He clutched his green superhero action figure tightly in his hand. Although I had offered to take care of Jack, living with him turned out to be challenging. He was quiet the first day, probably because he was in an unfamiliar place. But after a few days, once he got more comfortable, he started showing some stubbornness. "I don't want green peppers," Jack shouted, throwing the bell peppers from his chicken rice onto the floor. Sighing as I looked at the scattered vegetables, I saw Jack flinch and look up at me with fear in his eyes. "Hey, don't throw them. It's not nice," I said gently, picking up the peppers with a tissue. "They're not nice. I hate them." "But they're the same color as green," I pointed out. Jack pouted, his lips forming a stubborn line. That day, I gave up on making him eat the peppers. The next day, I made sweet and sour meatballs, hiding finely chopped bell peppers inside. Jack ate everything without noticing. "By the way, there were green peppers in those meatballs," I said after he finished. His eyes widened in surprise. "See? You ate them. That's amazing." When I patted his head, Jack blushed and said, "It was delicious. Do you think Mom will be surprised if I tell her I ate green peppers?" "Yeah, she'll be shocked." "Alright, before Mom gets back, I'm going to learn to eat bell peppers. I'll totally surprise her." Watching his bright smile warmed my heart. While this wasn't the family bonding I had always dreamed of, I realized that even without both parents, a sense of family togetherness could still be created. A few days passed since I started looking after Jack. With my job gone, I was able to dedicate my full attention to him. One evening, after putting Jack to bed, my phone suddenly rang. It was Mr. Matthews. "Hello? Hey, Mike, is this a good time? I know it's late. What's going on? Hey, is the deal going smoothly? I heard from Melissa that there's no issue, but I can't shake this uneasy feeling." Hearing Mr. Matthews's words, I caught my breath. But I quickly put on a calm front. "As Alyssa said, everything's going smoothly. So please, enjoy your family trip without worrying." "Oh, right. Wait, didn't I tell you?" Just as Mr. Matthews was about to say something, Jack's cries echoed from the bedroom. That crying. Sorry. I'm watching a relative's child right now. I've got to go calm him down, so I'm hanging up." After apologizing several times, I hung up the phone. Rushing into the bedroom, I found Jack sobbing loudly in the dimly lit room. "Mom, where's Mom?" My heart ached as I held Jack tightly, who was crying for his mother. He'd been pretending to be fine, but he wasn't at all. Realizing he had been holding it all in, I felt my eyes well up with emotion. "Mom's at the hospital. She's fighting off a bad illness right now. Mike, you're green, right? Can't you beat Mom's sickness?" His words hit me hard, and I felt a sting in my nose. Green's really good at rushing in to help people in trouble and fighting off tons of enemies. But when it comes to a tough, stubborn boss, that's where he struggles. "But your mom, she's pink, right?" "Right now, she's waiting for the right moment to fight back against that enemy. She's going to beat it and come home, I know it. So until then, how about we wait together?" As I gently patted his back, Jack seemed to understand, nodding with teary eyes. 2 days later, I took Jack to visit Sarah at the hospital. They told me I'm being discharged tomorrow, Sarah said softly. Hearing that, Jack's face lit up instantly. Mom, you beat the bad guys. With the Green Ranger vinyl figure in one hand, the one he insisted on bringing, Jack raised his arms in victory. Sarah tilted her head at his excitement. Actually, I began, about to tell her the story from the other day, when the sliding door to the hospital room opened. Standing there was Mr. Matthews. Beside him was a woman with a stern expression and a little girl. It was probably Mr. Matthews's wife and daughter. Why are you here? I thought you weren't coming back until the day after tomorrow? Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. Mr. Matthews glared at her. Of course I'd come back. My sister collapsed, after all. Sarah looked down, guilt shadowing her face. Mr. Matthews let out an exaggerated sigh. When I called Mike, he somehow knew I was on a family trip, and I could hear Jack crying over the phone. I figured something must have happened with Sarah, so I pressed the staff, and sure enough, he walked over to Sarah and placed his hand on the bed. Sarah, why didn't you tell me you collapsed? Sarah kept her head down. Her lips pressed tightly together. I couldn't stand to see her like that, so I took a step closer to Mr. Matthews. Sarah didn't want to trouble you, Mr. Matthews. She knew this was your first family vacation, and she didn't want to ruin it. Especially since you've taken care of her like a parent all these years. Mr. Matthews, still leaning on the bed, shot me a sharp look. I felt a bit intimidated by his gaze, but I stood my ground. This is really inconvenient. The voice came from an unexpected direction. Turning around, I saw Mr. Matthews's wife, Emily, frowning with her arms crossed, giving Sarah a stern look. She was beautiful, but her expression made her seem all the more intimidating. Sarah lowered her gaze even further under the weight of Emily's sharp look. Emily let out an exaggerated sigh. How long are you going to keep acting like a stranger? Am I the only one who considers both you and Jack part of this family? Sarah's eyes widened in surprise as she looked up. Emily tapped her fingers on her arm, a sign of her growing frustration. Then, she glanced over at Jack, who was playing with Mr. Matthews's daughter, Chloe. Jack was proudly showing off his Green Ranger action figure to her. Chloe, who hadn't watched the show, innocently asked, "What's so great about that?" The heroes in that show fight as a team, Emily continued. Each one has their strengths, and they rely on each other to cover their weaknesses. It's one for all, and all for one, right? Emily's gaze returned to Sarah. Her eyes, though sharp, were full of warmth. Sarah blinked in surprise. Even superheroes need help. We're just ordinary people, so we need others even more to get through life, don't you think? Stop trying to carry everything on your own. Let someone else handle what you're not good at. When you're struggling, rely on us. We're a family. The 5 of us, aren't we? Sarah's eyes filled with tears. And she began to sob, repeating "I'm sorry" over and over. Emily moved closer, gently stroking Sarah's head. This is when you say thank you, not sorry. Sarah cried even harder and whispered, "Thank you so much." Is Mom crying? Is Sarah hurt? Jack and Chloe ran over, concerned. With a soft voice, Mr. Matthews reassured them, "She's crying because she's happy." Watching the family bathed in warmth, it felt as though they were enveloped in a soft glow. The sight was so bright, I found myself squinting. Suddenly, Mr. Matthews looked at me and nodded toward the hallway. Once we stepped outside, Mr. Matthews bowed his head. "I'm sorry for what Alyssa did without my permission. Oh, no. I'm the one who messed up twice. I was late for our meetings, but both times it was because you were helping Sarah when she collapsed, right? If it weren't for you, she might not be here. I can't thank you enough. Mr. Matthews's expression softened. All I could do was shake my head. I've removed Alyssa from the project. The next person will handle the deal with you properly. You can count on that. I didn't know how to respond to that. It was hard to tell him that, since I'd been fired, I wouldn't be working on any deals anymore. What's wrong? Mr. Matthews, noticing my sudden silence, raised an eyebrow. It's okay, if you're struggling with something, just tell me. You're a part of our family now, and like Emily said, one for all. And all for one, right? Repeating Emily's words, he gave me a playful smile. Seeing that smile, I felt a little lighter. The truth is, I got fired. As I confessed, Mr. Matthews looked at me in shock. His expression quickly shifted to a more serious one. Really? They fired someone as capable as you? Seems like Mr. Brooks doesn't know talent when he sees it. Mr. Matthews stroked his chin thoughtfully for a moment before a mischievous grin spread across his face. Well then, how about you come work for me? What? Caught off guard by the unexpected offer, I couldn't help but let out a startled reply. You're the type who puts others first, even at your own expense. You didn't tell Alyssa you were helping Sarah, even though it would have worked in your favor. And you didn't mention it to me either, even though it could have saved you. You ended up losing because of that. I can't just ignore someone like you, someone who's too kind for their own good. Mr. Matthews's tone was serious as he said this. I felt a surge of warmth rise from deep within me. Even you, who says that, are quite the soft-hearted person. Trying to take in someone like me, I said, purposely using a teasing tone to downplay my feelings. But Mr. Matthews saw right through my act and slowly shook his head. No, you're a good man. Have some confidence. At the very least, my family needs you. The warm light that had surrounded Sarah and her family now seemed to shine on me, too. It was something I had given up on ever reaching. But here it was, so close. That same light was now shining on me. I couldn't hold back any longer. Tears began to spill uncontrollably. Mr. Matthews gave me 2 firm pats on the shoulder, as if to encourage me. Why not just go all the way and become part of the family? I think you and Sarah would be a good match. With a wide grin showing his white teeth, he said it so casually that I couldn't help but laugh through my sniffles. Taking Mr. Matthews up on his offer, I ended up working at JNU. Using the knowledge I'd gained from my previous job, I started working on selecting products for the store. Our business deal with my former company had been cut off. Apparently, Mr. Brooks had come back, trying to renegotiate the contract, but Mr. Matthews had turned him down flat. As Alyssa pointed out, their products don't really fit with what we sell. The only reason I even considered it was because I admired your approach. So, naturally, we cut ties. Mr. Matthews said with a smirk, his elbows resting on his desk. It was a mischievous smile. I could easily imagine Mr. Brooks sulking in defeat. Speaking of admiration, how are things going with you and Sarah? Huh? What do you mean? My face instantly flushed as the unexpected topic came up. Jack's pretty attached to you, and more importantly, Sarah doesn't seem to mind you, either. Really? Yeah, have some confidence. Mr. Matthews came over and gave me a strong pat on the back, encouraging me further. When I arrived at Sarah's place, Jack greeted me with a cheerful welcome back. It's welcome, not welcome back. Sarah gently corrected him, her cheeks slightly flushed. Jack pouted a bit. All right, I'll cook dinner. Sorry about that, just because I'm terrible at cooking. No need to say sorry. I teased her playfully, and she smiled with a slight nod. I'll help. Jack suddenly appeared in the kitchen. Calming Sarah, who was scolding Jack with a "don't get in the way," I decided to let Jack help out too. Since I decided on making omelette, I had him crack and mix the eggs. When the omelette was ready, we set it on the table. The smell of ketchup and freshly cooked eggs filled the room along with the warm steam. The three of us said, "Let's eat," in unison, and began our meal. Ah, nothing like a drink after hard work. Where did you learn to say that, Jack? Sarah laughed, clearly amused. After taking a bite of her omelette, she looked at me with a smile and said, "It's delicious." Just seeing that smile made me feel full. The table, surrounded by the three of us, was bathed in a warm, comforting light. After putting Jack to bed, I handed Sarah a freshly brewed cup of coffee. Thank you, Sarah said with a smile, taking a sip of her coffee. She let out a soft sigh of relief, holding the cup with both hands, gazing quietly at the surface of the black liquid. Our voices overlapped, and though I motioned for Sarah to go first, she encouraged me to speak instead. I think we both want to say the same thing. Her cheeks were flushed as she spoke. Steeling myself, I made up my mind. I then turned to face Sarah directly once again. Then, I bowed my head. Please, go out with me with marriage in mind. My voice, tense with nerves, echoed through the living room. I want to be part of your family, Sarah. I want to support you. And I'm sure there will be plenty of times when I'll need your support too. When I hesitantly looked up at her, Sarah's face had blossomed into a radiant smile. Yes, I won't hold back anymore. I'll rely on you, and I want you to rely on me too. We're already family. Her response made my heart leap, and I wrapped her in my arms. I had been alone for so long. I had always longed for a family, thinking it was something I could never have. But now, I wasn't alone anymore. Sarah, Jack, Mr. Matthews, Emily, and Chloe. We were a family of 6. We would support each other when someone was in need, and I knew they would be there for me when I needed them. With that thought, I made a firm vow in my heart to protect the warm light that surrounded us for the rest of my life.